Paul, can you give us an example of how I can connect Alaska Studies with my content area?
That's a very good question because one of the things that's common is people will say, well, how does this work for me? Or it doesn't matter for me. So let me give an extreme example and we'll see how that works.
Okay.
And one of the possibilities would be, say, all right, here's this one. This is Virgil's Aeneid. Virgil, the Roman author. This is in Latin, a couple of thousand years old, very European. It's kind of a stretch to imagine how this is going to connect with things Alaska Native. But when I first read this, I was in high school, and it was a very bad translation. And I thought, there's nothing more useless to read than this, except I need this in order to talk with some people because they assume that I know this. So I started reading. And awkward because the translation, again, was not very good. But what happened along the way are several things. One is that these are stories. Virgil's Aeneid is meant to be read out loud. It is a storytelling. And once I understood or got that point, I thought, well, that's what we do. We're on the same game. The other part of it is if you notice, it's kind of long for one story. And it's all poetry. So this is a very long piece of poetry. And I thought, with poetry, you have this certain style. There are things that you have to do. It has to do certain things in order to be poetry. And that's the same with our stories. They have to be told in a certain way. And in our system, Nupit, or Northern Eskimo, it is like a dance, where at the introduction, you get this very mild, low-key sound, and it's just not, and then it cycles back again so that you get it with more depth. And that's not uncommon in this structure. I noticed that there's this level of coming back to the main point. And I thought that was pretty interesting. The real shock, though, came when I understood the plot. And that is the Greeks are attacking this group of people. And they're attacking their city, Troy, where they're from. And it takes them years to defeat Troy, to get through the walls. And they do it by a trick. They use this wooden horse, giant wooden horse, in which their soldiers are in there, and then once it's put inside the walls as a trophy, at night they sneak down and open the gates, and it's game over for these people. So they're defeated, but a small group of people survive this, and their lands are taken. So they set out on these boats, and it's find a place in the world for us, for these people, the Trojans. And they go through all kinds of difficulties. That's a large part of what it's about. They face storms, they face one-eyed monsters, they face these areas where the sea has sirens, these creatures that will talk sailors into coming towards them, and then they're destroyed by this. And the point of it is that at one point, they end up in a place that becomes Carthage, which is the enemy of Rome. And Dido's the ruler of the area, and she says, park your boats, here's a feast, we're going to celebrate your arrival, life is good. And a part of the deal is you can stay with us. Carthage offers the Trojans a place to stay because they like soldiers who've experienced a lot of hardships and families that understand how important it is to have a home. They think they'll be ideal immigrants. With the same thing that is commonly expected, that they will learn to speak Carthaginian, and they will adopt themselves as Carthaginians. And Aeneas, the leader of the Trojans, he says, let's party. And they do. They have a great time, and there's this romance between Dido and Aeneas. And finally, though, there's this discovery. Although it's a great feast, the price is too high. And the main point of it is the world needs us. They need our history, they need our language, they need our story, they need our outlook, they need our disposition. We are a gift, and we need to not throw that away by assimilation. Well, that was kind of a 2x4 as an idea. It was a breakthrough, for me. It was, oh my gosh, that's kind of happening to us. We've gotten overwhelmed. And sure, at the outset, there's just outright violence, and there's taking of land, and there's taking of water. The real thing that is the deadly threat after physical extinction is cultural extinction or elimination. And in this way, it's like the sirens. There's all these goods and materials and all this stuff. So by this point, I'm way off the deep end, and I'm making all these connections, which might or might not have any relevance to anything. But as a student, as an Alaska Native, that's where I went. And I had room to do that. I remember talking with my English teacher about this, and she said, "What are you doing to my Virgil? He doesn't say anything about Eskimos. He's not talking about Nome, Alaska. This is about Rome and Italy, not Nome." And she said, "But maybe you're onto something, so write it down and let me read it." I must have written that thing 5 or 6 times or more, because she would circle what she liked best, and she would say, "I think you're trying to make a point here, but it's not quite clear enough," and a little grammar, and we're off to the races. And without my knowing it, she had me both do the paper, and she would talk with me about it. So I'm getting a tutorial. She's slipping in how to talk through your ideas with another person who's interested but may not understand it. And it's Virgil's Aeneid. It's 2,000 years old. So if we can make that bridge, what I think was key, though, was that she knew that there were concepts that were very important to her subject that we have to know. That literature is about what's going on inside your life, inside your mind, as well as what other people are doing in the natural world and the spiritual world in this one. And once she knows what her key concepts are, and she understands the other culture that she's not a part of, but she's a guest in, then she can make these bridges for her students deliberately. I don't know if she had a deliberate policy or a plan when she suggested that I read this. I don't know if she had all that in mind. But Virgil's Aeneid, I'm on my 3rd translation. It's the way I inform myself about how we compare with these other models of the questions and challenges that we face. What I really appreciated about it, too, is that Virgil's a Roman, and he is using these Trojans, this story, and he's using Aeneas to help inform and make better being a Roman. He's trying to inform the Roman Empire through an example of this really small group, comparatively. And that was a takeaway for me that I think is encouraging for us as Alaska Natives. So, going back to it, it's having to understand the key concepts, not just how to do things. Actually, as a teacher, you can't make these bridges unless you know what the key concepts are in your subject. And then you have to learn about the other cultural group that you're trying to connect with. The one in Alaska that we're least successful with by all the data is Alaska Native cultures and people and students. So I think this is a way to address the problem. The downside is Houghton Mifflin is not going to solve this for us. As a teacher, we're going to have to draw from our teacher education program about curriculum development and about theories of education, about your philosophy of education. All of those things that you thought were useless are the well that you can draw from in which to help your students.